For me, the most interesting thing about the US presidential election of 2024 was what was left unsaid. Both Trump and Harris framed themselves as opposites, as did the media. But past the hollow rhetoric and identity politics, I think they offered something very, very similar to each other, but with vastly different packaging. A new way forward. Make America great again. Yes, we can. They both offered the hope, the fantasy, of a future that cannot exist.
It's got electrolytes.
Now, I'm not saying Trump and Harris are the same. For anyone whose understanding of American politics comes solely from the mainstream media, especially passive media, where you can just sit and let it wash over you like waves of a fever, the idea that Trump and Harris are remotely similar might seem insane. Trump says he will deport millions of illegal immigrants, impose tariffs on imports, and privatize or at least heavily cut previously core institutions, such as the Department of Education and the Department of Social Security. Harris has no such plans for ramping up deportations, no plans to impose tariffs, and positioned herself as a champion of reproductive rights, and as the only thing that could inhibit the erosion of America's access to safe abortion. These agendas are very different, and they will have very different outcomes in the immediate and short term. But both the campaigns and their parties, and the media aligned with them, obfuscated topics central to them. On the Republican side, immigration and the economy were the focus and presented as hand in hand. The apolitical truth is that America has benefited economically, especially from illegal immigration. It is the illegal immigrants who can most easily be exploited, and whose existence as a poorly paid underclass is critical for keeping grocery prices low, especially if you're going to start taxing imports. Illegal immigrants make up about 3.3% of the population, do not receive Social Security, cannot vote, and are not the reason there is a housing shortage. The American economy, by the usual measures of GDP and the stock market, is at this moment doing very well. The Democrats couldn't push against this with the truth because the truth hurts them. Illegal immigration is a net positive because generally illegal immigrants have fewer legal rights and don't want to be detected, so they end up in jobs that pay them and treat them in ways companies and whole industries would not be able to if they were citizens. Farms, industry, and the nation benefit from this, which is why recent efforts to deport and stop illegal immigration have been token. Just as the Democrats can't admit to this, they can't admit to the truth about the economy. The economy is doing very well, but the majority of working Americans don't feel the benefits of this fact, which they're told over and over, because GDP and stock market growth positively impact a tiny fraction at the tippy top of society. The shareholders and owners reap the rewards, and if things ever go wrong, it's they who get the life jackets. The Democrats can't say this out loud, and instead appealed to a vague middle class they never defined. Are people who make $50,000 and people who make $400,000 a year really in the same economic class? The two parties are not the same, but their reason for these obfuscations, I argue here, obviously, is. I think it's even better exemplified by the omissions. Private equity may not be responsible for the surge in house prices alone. As of early 2022, it owned about 5% of single-family rentals in the US, but it is responsible for hollowing out swathes of hospitals, restaurants, autism care clinics, nursing homes, dentists, ambulatory services, and much, much more. But its short-term, profit-driven cutting and flipping benefits a tiny minority at the cost of the regular taxpayers' money and stability. There was no discussion of this on either side. There was no discussion either around the increasing number of homes owned as investments, with 26% of, in quotes, low-price homes held by investors at the end of 2024. There are a myriad of reasons houses and apartments are becoming more and more expensive, but that surely is an important one. Like private equity, this wasn't mentioned beyond sentence-long platitudes. Consider this. Since 1990, the top 0.1% in America has increased its share of wealth from 9 to 14% of all wealth in the USA. According to the Federal Reserve, as of 2024, the 0.1%, taken as one, control just under $21 trillion of assets. The bottom 50%, half of the country, half of all Americans, control about 3.8 trillion. So if the richest 0.1% gave half of their assets to the bottom 50%, they would still be incredibly rich, and the net assets of the bottom 50% would almost quadruple. The 0.9% beneath the top 1% without the top 0.1%, control a further 25 to 26 trillion. The richest 10% of the country, altogether, control a combined total of about $103 trillion. If the richest 10% gave half of their assets, or, just dreaming here, were taxed half of their assets, and those assets went to the rest of the 90%, the 90%'s net assets would double. If the richest 10% gave half of their assets to the poorest 50%, half of the country's assets, the poorest half, would increase by almost 14 times. If the economy is doing so well, why can't normal people buy a house for themselves, not to flip, but to live in? If the stock market is so great, why haven't real wages gone up since the 80s? Well, this is why, because there is an economic elite that really are the real masters of both the Democrats, the Republicans, and us all. That's where your money goes, straight to the top. I wasn't expecting to be alive for so long after saying that. Bummer. The earth is being held up by the muscular arms of its entrepreneur plutocrats, like it or not. So says a Citigroup document from 2005, made famous by Michael Moore. The document makes plain that in the banker's view at least, America and really the world is a plutocracy ruled by and for the moneyed. The people who want to sell you shit like this. Sequoia Capital, the venture capital firm and authors of numerous puff pieces backing thief Sam Bankman-Fried, gave the Harris campaign nearly $9 million. Or rather, their staff did, because organizations can't do that. That would be grossly undemocratic. This cycle, Sequoia have given tens of millions to both Republican and Democrat causes, committees, and miscellaneous money holes. Trump's top contributor for 2024 was Timothy Mellon, an 82-year-old businessman who is the grandson of a US Treasury Secretary, and who, by his own account, is a multi-billionaire who was born in a mansion, went to a private school on a private plane, has never had a job, and was born rich. He contributed $150 million to the Trump campaign. Behind him, for Trump, is SpaceX, with a near $120 million contribution. Other quasi-political players, like Goldman Sachs, gave money to both Republican and Democrat campaigns, almost equally. But they don't need to commit the tens of millions of private investors, because their influence is assured. And let's not forget the backhanders paid to politicians, such as Hillary Clinton, in the form of speaking fees. Trump's last administration employed ex-Goldman Sachs executives such as Steven Mnuchin, Gary Cohn, and Dina Powell. So did Biden's administration, with ex-Goldman acolytes like Kurt Summers and Josh Zoffer. Goldman Sachs ex-employees found their way into government positions under Obama, big time, and before that under Bush, and before that under Clinton. Goldman is but just one powerful financial entity with perennial reach into the White House. None of this was ever touched upon in any meaningful way. Trump says, from time to time, that the swamp will be drained. Various Democrats, from time to time, call for money and vested interests to be wrenched out of politics. But neither side do this. They don't make any effort to do this. This is impossible. You can't separate politics from vested interest, because right now and right here at least, that's what politics is. Instead, the opposing candidates position themselves primarily as opposites along lines of identity and emotion. That's not to say this is a great big conspiracy or that the presidential race isn't real. It is real, but it's a race between opposing business interests where the very wealthy never really lose. The election and democracy, right now in the USA, are rather acts of theatre to placate the 99%, and with mainstream media controlled by the very wealthy, there is no one with a significant enough audience to challenge this in a way where it even seems to cross the majority of the electorate's minds. Race, immigration, abortion are all important and all worth talking about. But, next to the challenges facing America and the rest of the world in the immediate future, the next 4 to 6 years let's say, they unfortunately pale into insignificance. The failure of carbon sinks and the desertification of the equator will create multiple crises, the likes of which we've never seen. Famine, inflation, and refugee crises to start. And really, how could either Trump or Harris, or any political candidate you might consider remotely viable, campaign on these issues? I will fix America, one way or another, is a much easier sell than, because of an extremely complex and not very easy to understand political social system, because of our own greed, which you, dear electorate, have benefited from only slightly compared to the billionaires, but much more than the rest of the world. The golden age has come and gone without you realizing it. Elect me and prepare to dig deep. Furthermore, if you watched my trilogy on the limits to growth and if you subscribe to those ideas, then the candidates address none of the real issues. A president cannot magic up more usable sand for concrete. A president cannot prevent a global fertilizer shortage. A president cannot change physical reality. And, as I said there, people at large don't want to hear this. Neither party can win on telling the American people the truth. They cannot win on telling the American people to buy less crap they don't need, crap currently made by slaves, or that growth is almost over, or that the West relies on the exploitation of the rest of the world and has built its empire of shit on their bones. Both parties are the parties of drill baby drill and spend baby spend, and hope. A hope that the future, the real future, doesn't happen. So, what am I saying? Money wins. Again. Forever and ever. Question mark. Thanks very much for watching. Subscribe if you like. If you're feeling flush, why not give me some money on Patreon? And all of that. Thank you very much. I'd love to know what you think about this. I'll read the comment. Please don't bother commenting about me being bald. I'm well aware. And I stand by my baldness. And, apart from that, I guess I'll see you soon. Thanks again. Don't let this get you down too much. We will survive. Many of us will survive. Many will die, but some will live. Everyone dies eventually. I guess that's the best spin.